The 42nd floor sky lobby of Aurora Pacific Bank had never held a silence like this one. 100 people stood frozen beneath the words etched in brushed steel across the marble wall. Trust is the only currency we cannot print, and not one of them was breathing. In the middle of the floor, with the whole of Victoria Harbor glittering behind the glass, Bryce Tang stood in a suit that cost more than most of the room made in a month, holding a heavy crystal award with both hands. His knuckles had gone white. The crystal was trembling. A few steps away stood a young man in a cheap gray suit with a collar a size too big, the same intern the whole floor had spent a summer calling the Coffee Boy. He was not shouting. His face was almost calm. He simply looked at the crystal in Bryce's hands and said 6 quiet words that would take Bryce Tang's entire world apart. Put her name back on it. A phone lay face up on the signing table, its screen still glowing from the call that had just ended. A call that had turned the most powerful people in the room the color of ash. The interim CEO could not lift his eyes. The head of the analyst program had gripped the back of a chair. And Bryce Tang, whose father had spent the summer quietly buying up the bank around them, whose favorite threat was that one call from his father could have anyone in the room begging on the street, finally understood exactly who he had spent 8 weeks trying to humiliate. To understand how an intern in a $40 suit brought a tycoon's son to his knees in front of the whole bank, and why every powerful adult in that sky lobby had gone pale, we have to go back to a warm June morning, a green and white ferry crossing the harbor, and the first cruel thing Bryce Tang ever said to a boy he was certain was nobody at all. The first star ferry of the morning smelled of salt and diesel and strong milk tea, and Leo loved it anyway.
He sat in the same spot every morning, lower deck, port side, on a wooden bench worn smooth by 100 years of commuters, with a canvas satchel on his lap and a folded newspaper in one hand. He was 23, lean, with dark eyes that most people mistook for shyness. Every few minutes he'd glance up, a fishmonger dozing against a rail, a schoolgirl practicing violin fingering on an invisible neck, an old man feeding the ferry's resident gulls against every rule posted on the wall. Then he'd go back to his paper. He liked the ferry. On the ferry, nobody performed. People were simply people. When the boat bumped into the central pier, Leo stepped off into the wet heat and looked up at the tower that had defined his family for 3 generations, Aurora Pacific Bank, 60 floors of glass and steel, with the harbor doubled in its face. To most of Hong Kong, it was simply the private bank, the one old money whispered about, the one that had quietly carried families through every crash since 1961. Because Leo Nung was not really Leo Nung. His full name was Leo Cheng Kao Lok, and the bank in front of him, the trust that controlled it, the founding shares locked in a family holding, the name over the door in gold, belonged to his family. His grandmother had built it. And when the old woman's heart had begun to fail the winter before, she had made her grandson promise one thing. "Before you ever sit in that chairman's chair," she had told him, her hand thin and strong around his, "go and be a junior, a real one. No name, no car, no special treatment. Walk in through the same door as the other interns and find out how my bank treats the people who can do nothing for it. That will tell you everything about whether it is still worth keeping."
Leo had been at her bedside for that. Cheng Wan Yi, the woman whose name half of Hong Kong's charity wings were carved with, whose portrait hung in the 40th floor boardroom, had started with nothing. The daughter of a money changer in Changwon, she had counted grubby banknotes behind a caged window as a girl, been turned away from 3 banks for a loan because she was a woman with no surname worth the name, and built her own instead. 1 storefront, then 2, then a tower. She had spent her life making sure the bank remembered the people the big houses looked straight through. And near the end, what frightened her was not dying. It was the reports on her desk. Accounts opened for the right families with none of the checks. Juniors worked to the bone while heirs collected the credit. A slow rot
where a famous surname was buying what honest work used to earn. I built a place that was supposed to be a door for people with no door, she said. I am afraid it has become a velvet rope. Promise me you will find out which it is before you decide what to do with it. Not from a report, from the bottom. So Leo had promised and meant it. What he had not expected was how much he would come to respect the view from the bottom. The diligent, unglamorous, deeply decent people who lived there, none of whom had the faintest idea they were being quietly watched over by the one person in the building with the power to protect them.
So Leo had applied to the bank's fiercely competitive summer analyst program under his mother's maiden name on papers that listed him as a scholarship graduate from a public university, father deceased, mother a seamstress. Every word technically true. He rented a windowless room in an old walk-up in Sham Shui Po. He took the ferry and the MTR. He wore the same 2 shirts. And for the first 6 weeks of the program, not one person had guessed the truth. Not the CEO, not the program head, not the intern who was about to make his summer a misery. That intern arrived, as he always did, in a squeal of tires and a cloud of noise. A matte black Bentley swung into the no-stopping zone outside the tower and stopped across the loading bay the delivery vans needed. A driver in a peaked cap leapt out to open the rear door. Bryce Tang unfolded from the back in sunglasses that reflected the whole plaza, checked himself in the tinted glass, and held out a hand without looking, a paper coffee cup dangling from 2 fingers, already empty. "Bin it," Bryce said to the nearest body, which happened to be Leo. "And I take a flat white, extra shot, from the place on the ground floor, not the pantry sludge. Go." Leo took the empty cup on reflex, looked at it, and set it gently on the ledge beside them. "I'm one of the summer analysts," he said mildly. "Same as you. The bins are by the lift." Bryce lowered his sunglasses. He took in the cheap suit, the canvas satchel, the scuffed shoes, and a slow, delighted smile spread across his face. The smile of a boy who had just found a new toy. "Oh," he said, "you were one of the scholarship ones, the diversity hires." He said the word the way other people said cockroach. 2 other interns drifted over, sensing sport. "This is what they let in now. Mate, my family has banked here for 3 generations. My father is about to own half this building and most of this street." He pushed the empty cup back into Leo's hand. "Flat white, extra shot. You're replaceable. 1 call from my father and you're begging on Des Voeux Road." Leo didn't move. He held Bryce's gaze for 1 long, quiet second. Long enough that something faintly uncertain flickered behind the rich boy's eyes. And then he set the cup back down on the ledge and walked past him into the tower, saying nothing. It was the nothing that made Bryce hate him. He had built his whole self out of getting a rise, and the coffee boy would not rise. Inside the ground floor lift lobby, an older woman in the bank's gray pantry uniform was wiping down the brass rail around the founder's plaque, slow and careful. Meiji, Auntie May, had pushed the tea trolley at Aurora Pacific for 30 years. She knew every banker's order, kept a tin of salted plum sweets on her trolley for anyone having a hard day, and had personally talked more than 1 trembling first-day junior out of the toilets and back into the room. Everyone loved her. She looked up as Leo came in, and her round face folded into a grin. "Ah ya, the Ferry boy," she said in Cantonese. "You eat breakfast? You never eat." "I'll eat, Meiji," Leo said, which was what he always said. "You'll faint into the shredder," she scolded, and pressed a warm bun from her trolley into his hand like a stern grandmother. "Big meeting room needs food. Eat." Leo smiled. A real one. The kind almost nobody at the bank ever saw. For 6 weeks, this woman had been kinder to a stranger she thought was a broke kid than most of the wealthy families he'd grown up around had ever been to anyone. She had no idea she was being kind to the owner's grandson. That was exactly why it counted. His grandmother had taught him the only reliable test of a person ever invented. Watch how they treat the people who can do nothing for them. He had come to apply that test to an entire bank, and MyJ had passed it before he'd got through the lobby. Behind them, the revolving door spat out Bryce and his two shadows. Bryce's eyes landed on Auntie Mai's yellow wet floor cone. "Who left this junk in the walkway?" he said loudly, and kicked the cone skidding across the marble. His shoe left a black scuff. "Oi, trolley lady, you missed a spot. Whole lobby smells like a wet market because of people like you." He looked her up and down with theatrical disgust. 30 years pushing a tea cart. That is the saddest thing I have ever seen. This is really your whole life? The lobby had gone quiet. MyJ's jaw tightened, but she was a professional. She had swallowed worse. "Careful, young master," she said evenly, bending for the cone. "Floor's slippery. Don't want you to fall." "Don't young master me," Bryce snapped. "You work for us. Everyone in this building works for my family, or is about to. What's your name on a punch card?" Leo felt something cold and still settle in his chest. The specific patient anger of a person who holds every card and is choosing for now to watch instead. He stepped forward, gently, putting himself between Bryce and the old woman. "She asked you not to slip," Leo said quietly. "Maybe say thank you."
Bryce stared, then laughed. The ferry boy and the tea lady. Adorable. He leaned close to Leo and lowered his voice for the two of them only. "Keep getting in my way, scholarship, and I will make these 8 weeks the worst of your life. Then I will make sure no bank in this city ever calls you back. I can do that." "I'm starting to," Leo said. He helped Meiji set the cone back up, took his bun, and rode the lift up to the analyst floor. Behind him, he could feel Bryce's glare like heat on his neck. What Bryce did not know, what nobody knew, was that in the bottom of Leo's satchel, under a battered book of harbor tide tables, was a plain phone with a single contact starred at the top. A man named Albert Kwan, the family solicitor for 40 years and the executor of his grandmother's estate. One call to that number could rearrange this entire tower. Leo had never used it. He had promised his grandmother he would stay a junior until the program ended. That morning was also when Leo first met the person who would end up changing how he thought about the whole plan. Her name was Mabel Chow, a fellow summer analyst, and she sat at the worst desk on the floor, the one under the broken air vent, wedged by the printers, with her shoulders around her ears and a half-eaten cup of instant noodles going cold beside a screen full of numbers. Leo knew the look. It was the look of someone who had clawed into a room like this and spent every day afraid that any second someone would decide she didn't belong. She was the sharpest modeler in the cohort and the only one who never said so. Her father drove a red minibus on the Kwanpong route. Her mother sold vegetables in the Sham Shui Po market. She was the first in her family to wear a lanyard into a building like this, and the return offer at the end of the summer was, quietly, the difference between her family making rent easily or not at all. That first week, when the program head dumped a brutal overnight valuation on the interns and half of them groaned and vanished, it was Mabel who stayed, and Mabel whose model came back flawless. Bryce's came back blank. So Bryce did what he always did. He found the person doing the real work and attached himself to her like a barnacle. "You're the numbers one, right?" he told her, dropping his bag on her desk. "Great, you'll run my client folders too. I've got dinners. Don't make it obvious." It was not a request. Everyone knew Bryce's father was the reason the analyst program had its new Harborview floor at all. A girl who needed the return offer was in no position to say no. So Mabel stayed later and did his work as well as her own, and said nothing. Leo watched it happen. When Bryce swept off to a lunch that lasted the afternoon, Leo pulled a chair to the corner of Mabel's desk and quietly took half the tickets off her pile. "You did the first day valuation blind and beat everyone in this cohort," he said. "You know that, right? You don't owe him your nights." "Easy for the guy with nothing to lose to say," she said, not unkindly, rubbing her eyes. Then softer. "Sorry. Thanks. Really." She hesitated, then turned her screen a few degrees toward him, the way you show someone a secret. You want to see something dumb? Buried at the bottom of her model, in a tiny cell the color of the background, invisible unless you knew to select it, was a line of text, built by the girl from Sham Shui Po. "My dad says sign your work where only you can find it," she said, almost embarrassed, "so no one can ever tell you it wasn't yours. Every model I've ever built has it. Stupid, I know."
"It's not stupid," Leo said. He looked at the little hidden line for a moment longer than he needed to. He had no idea then that the small private signature of a minibus driver's daughter would one day become the one piece of proof no amount of money could scrub, reword, or argue away. He had no idea either how hard the promise to his grandmother was about to be tested. If you want to understand how much power a 24-year-old can have when nobody says no to him, you only had to watch Bryce Tang cross the analyst floor. Desks were vacated, the good meeting rooms emptied when he wanted them. The barista in the ground floor cafe had learned to start his flat white the second the Bentley pulled up, because the one time she'd been slow, Bryce had complained to building management and gotten her hours cut. Senior bankers who should have known better laughed a half-second too long at his jokes. His father, the shipping and property tycoon Victor Tang, had spent the spring making a very public show of supporting Aurora Pacific. A large capital injection, talk of a strategic partnership. His family's name floated for the naming rights on the new trading floor. Bryce wore that like a crown. He genuinely believed the rules were a thing that happened to smaller people. And for 3 weeks, he made Leo his personal project. It started small, the way cruelty always does. The coffee runs became a standing joke. Bryce would summon Leo across the floor with 2 fingers and a flat white, you know the drill, in front of the senior staff, purely to watch him fetch it. He'd accidentally send Leo to the wrong floor for a document, then report to the program head that the scholarship intern couldn't follow simple instructions. When a real task came up, a live comparables analysis the whole cohort was told to attempt, Leo turned in the cleanest work on the floor, and the program head, a sharp managing director named Desmond Yao, read it aloud as the standard the others should reach. That only made it worse, because here was the thing that truly enraged Bryce Tang. The coffee boy was brilliant. Not loudly. He just quietly produced work that was better than everyone's, then went to eat a cheap rice box alone by the window. To a young man who had been handed everything and earned none of it, nothing was more humiliating than watching someone with nothing earn what he couldn't. So Bryce escalated. The second week, Leo came back from a coffee run, the humiliating kind Bryce had made him do in front of a visiting client, to find his satchel emptied onto the floor by the printers, his tide table book split down the spine, his notes swept into the recycling. Bryce happened to be leaning nearby with his flat white. "Wow," he said, wide-eyed. "Someone really doesn't respect your things. You should get a locker." "Oh, those cost money, don't they?" His shadow sniggered. Leo crouched, gathered his soaked notes, and looked up at Bryce with those calm, unreadable eyes. "That's going to cost you more than you think," he said. "Are you threatening me?" Bryce laughed. "With what? Your ferry ticket?" Leo picked up his ruined book, put it in his bag, and walked away. Bryce took it as a victory. He always did. He never once wondered why the coffee boy was never afraid. But Bryce was not only escalating against Leo. Cruelty, once rewarded, always spreads to whoever is weakest in the room. And that week, that turned out to be Mabel. It happened in Desmond Yao's Thursday deal review, the one where each analyst had to defend a live model in front of the desk. By bad luck, Mabel had been paired to co-present with Bryce, who had done none of it and expected her to carry both their names. When a senior banker's stress test question exposed a flaw, a currency hedge assumption that hadn't been updated after a rate move, Bryce threw her under the minibus without blinking. "That's her section," he said, sliding his chair back. "I flagged it to her twice." And then, loud enough for the room, "They really will let anyone in now. Did your scholarship come with a Bloomberg license, sweetheart, or do we all just get to watch you drown?" Mabel's eyes filled.
The room did the terrible thing rooms do, the nervous laugh, the sudden fascination with the carpet. Leo stood up. He walked to the screen, picked up the marker, and calmly circled a single figure. "The error's here," he said. "It's the hedge rate. It's pulling from last Friday's fixing because the data feed on the shared drive didn't refresh over the weekend. Every model built off that template has the same stale number, including 3 on this desk." He corrected it in 2 lines, and the model held. Then he looked at Bryce. Her build is the reason it was close enough to fix in 10 seconds. Maybe say thank you. Desmond Yao, who had watched the whole thing, cleared his throat. "Mr. Mung is right. The structure is Miss Chow's, and it's the best on the floor. Mr. Tang, see me about your contribution, or its absence." Bryce did not like that at all, because for the second time, the coffee boy had made him small in the one arena he could not buy his way out of, a room where being right was the only currency that counted.
So he went looking for an arena where his money still worked. He found it the next morning in the cafe, cutting the whole queue, accidentally knocking his flat white down the front of Leo's only good shirt, then dropping a crisp red $100 note on the counter with a smirk. "For the dry cleaning," he said. His shadows howled, but the barista, a young woman named Bea, whose hours Bryce had once had cut, quietly slid the note back across the counter. "His coffee's on me," she said. "Yours is $38. It was a small act of courage, and it cost her. Bryce photographed her name badge and promised she'd regret it. But Leo saw it, and he did not forget who was brave when bravery was expensive. 2 days later, Leo was called into a compliance meeting. Someone had filed an anonymous note claiming the scholarship intern had been misusing the client database. It was baseless, and it evaporated the moment Desmond Yao vouched for him, but the message underneath was unmistakable. "I can make you spend every week here defending your right to exist." Bryce had found the one weapon that genuinely frightens a junior with no cushion. Not fists, but paperwork. The slow, bureaucratic bleed people with money can inflict forever, and people without it can only endure. What Bryce didn't know was that the coffee boy he was trying to drown in forms could end the whole game with a single phone call, and was still deliberately choosing not to. Not yet. Not until it would count for everyone, and not only for himself. That night, Leo sat on his narrow bed in Sham Shui Po and did a different kind of arithmetic. Bryce hadn't only targeted him. He had humiliated a diligent colleague, threatened a barista, mocked a tea lady in front of a lobby, and destroyed the belongings of the one intern who kept standing up. It was a pattern, and patterns, Leo knew, were exactly what turned a handful of ugly moments into a case that could not be waved away. So he stopped being angry and started being organized. Dates, names, who was hurt and who was brave. He was not raging, he was documenting. And a junior who documents is far more dangerous than one who shouts. The third week, it stopped being about Leo at all and dragged in the one person he could not stand to see hurt. May J had a routine. Every evening at 7, she brought the trolley around the floors, still burning with late-working juniors, refilling the hot water, leaving a salted plum sweet by the keyboard of anyone who looked like they hadn't slept. That week, Bryce and his shadows had claimed the best corner meeting room, the one with the harbor view, as their private lounge. Feet on the table, takeaway containers everywhere, a mess May J quietly cleared each night without complaint. One evening, Bryce knocked a full cup of bubble tea onto the carpet, on purpose, watched the tapioca scatter, and pointed. "Oi, trolley lady, chop chop." As May J knelt to mop it, Bryce pulled out his phone and started filming. "Say hello to my followers, auntie," he narrated, panning down her bent back. "This is what happens if you don't study, kids. 30 years, and the view is the floor." His shadows laughed. He zoomed on her name badge. MEI. Look at her go. May J kept mopping. Her hands were shaking now, not from the work. Leo was at a desk across the floor, and he stood so fast his chair clattered backwards. Every head turned.
He crossed the room in 6 strides, took the phone out of Bryce's hand, not roughly, just decisively, and stopped the recording. "Delete it," he said. For the first time, Bryce looked genuinely startled. Then the fury came. "Do you have any idea who you are touching?" He snatched the phone back. "You just made the biggest mistake of your sad little life." He was breathing hard, blotchy. "You want to defend the trolley lady so badly? Fine. Let's see how much good it does either of you." He stormed out. Meiji put a hand on Leo's arm. "You shouldn't have, boy," she said softly. "Boys like that, their fathers own the world. He'll make you pay." "Let him try," Leo said. But inside, for the first time, a thread of worry pulled tight. Not for himself, but for the woman beside him. Leo could absorb anything Bryce threw. He had a wall of lawyers a phone call away. Meiji had a monthly wage, 30 years of loyalty, and a husband whose kidneys were failing. That night, alone on the darkened floor, Leo noticed something quiet. Bryce had left his laptop open on the lounge table, logged into the shared deal drive, careless as always. Leo touched nothing. He simply saw it. Bryce's summer capstone, the live pitch every analyst had to deliver to the investment committee, the one that decided the coveted Analyst of the Summer Award and its guaranteed graduate associate offer, was an empty folder, 4 days before the deadline. Bryce hadn't built a thing. Leo closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and rode the last MTR south. He didn't know yet exactly how Bryce would fill that empty folder, but he had a feeling, and he was right.
The Analyst of the Summer was the most coveted thing a summer intern could win. It came with a Crystal Award, a line in the bank's internal magazine, and, the part that mattered, a guaranteed graduate associate offer and a rotation on the bank's flagship deal desk. Every serious analyst in the cohort had been working toward it for weeks. Mabel had built something genuinely original for it, a full restructuring model for a struggling family-owned shipping client, complete with a financing plan she'd stress-tested against 3 decades of freight rate data. Data she understood in her bones because she'd grown up in a household where a bad month on the roads meant a lean month at the table. It was elegant, it was hers, and it lived on the same shared deal drive Bryce Tang had access to. Buried in it, in a cell the color of the background, was her signature, built by the girl from Sham Shui Po. The kind of quiet, private joke a genuinely brilliant person leaves inside her own work. She had no idea then that it would become the one thing no amount of money could argue away. A thief could rename every tab. He could never find or remove a fingerprint he didn't know was there. 4 days before the committee pitch, Mabel's model was copied in the dead of night to Bryce's folder. The metadata was crudely scrubbed, the tabs were renamed, a few labels were reworded, and Bryce Tang submitted Mabel Chow's work as his own. And because he needed the coffee boy gone too, he added a poisoned twist. He told the program head that he had caught the scholarship intern and Chow leaking a live client model outside the bank, and that Mabel's version was the stolen copy. When Mabel went to submit her real model the next morning, the system flagged it as a duplicate of one already logged under Bryce Tang. Her own work, stolen and timestamped ahead of her, now recast as evidence that she was the thief.
Mabel went straight to Desmond Yao. She laid out the freight data, the version history, the weeks of work. Yao believed her. You could see it in his face. When Yao came out, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "The committee has to review it," he said quietly. "These things take time. Be careful." And here is where Bryce crossed the line he could never uncross. Because there had been a witness. On the night the files were copied, Meiji had been clearing the corner lounge on the 40th floor. She'd seen Bryce hunched over 2 laptops at 2 in the morning, muttering, sweating, moving files. She hadn't understood what she was seeing, but when the theft accusation swept the floor, she understood exactly. And Meiji, being Meiji, did the honest thing. She went to Desmond Yao and told the truth. that she'd seen young Master Tang alone with 2 machines that night. Bryce found out within the hour. He didn't panic. That was the frightening thing about him. He had learned, watching his father, that a big enough lie with enough money behind it always beats the truth. So he walked into the interim CEO's office, set his father's partnership on the table like a loaded gun, and calmly reported that the tea lady, May, had been stealing. A client's gift, a boxed luxury watch left for a private banking customer, had gone missing from the 40th floor lounge, Bryce said. And wasn't it interesting that the trolley woman was up there alone at night? Wasn't it convenient that this thief was suddenly inventing wild stories about the son of the bank's most important new partner? By Friday, May G, 30 years, salted plum sweets, 3 generations of talk-down juniors, was walked out of the tower by security with a cardboard box in her hands, dismissed for theft. Her final wages withheld pending investigation.
That detail was not a small one. May J's husband had been on dialysis for 2 years, 3 sessions a week at a subsidized clinic, and the staff medical benefit that came with her 30 years of service was the only reason his treatment hadn't lapsed. The same letter that fired her for theft cut those benefits at month's end. So Bryce Tang's lie had not merely taken an old woman's job and her good name, it had reached into a clinic and hung a countdown clock over a sick man's bed. When Leo learned that, from Bia, who knew May J's family from the neighborhood, something in him that had stayed patient for 6 weeks went very still and very cold. This was the line the whole story had been walking toward. Not an insult, not a ruined book. A man in a dialysis chair because a boy who had everything had decided a woman who had nothing was disposable. He found May J at the tram stop at the bottom of the hill, holding her cardboard box, staring at nothing. "They said I stole," she whispered. 30 years, and they took his word over mine because his father signs the checks. I told the truth about what I saw, and they threw me out like rubbish. Her voice broke. Who hires a 60-year-old tea lady with theft on her record? What do I tell my husband? Leo sat beside her on the bench. For a long moment he said nothing. A tram rattled past without stopping. "May J," he said finally, and his voice had changed. Something underneath it had gone very quiet and very hard. "I need you to trust me for 12 days. Can you do that?" "Trust you to do what, a boy? You take the ferry? You eat cold rice boxes? What can you possibly—" 12 days, he repeated, and put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't sign anything they send you. Don't cash anything. Just wait." That night, for the first time all summer, Leo took the starred contact out of hiding. He sat on the edge of his bed in Sham Shui Po, looked at the name Albert Kwan for a long time, and thought about the promise to his grandmother, stay a junior until the end. He thought about an empty coffee cup pushed into his hand. He thought about a phone filming an old woman's back. He thought about a cardboard box at a tram stop. Poor, he thought. Grandmother, I think this is exactly what you sent me to see, and I think you'd want me to do something about it. He pressed call. Albert Kwan was 74, had been the Cheng family solicitor for 4 decades, and had not been surprised by anything since the handover. When his phone rang near midnight and the screen said K-Lock, he sat straight up. "Tell me you're all right," Kwan said. "I'm fine," Leo said, "but I'm going to break my promise to Poor, and I need your help to do it properly." He told him everything. The ferry, the lobby, the ruined book, the video, the stolen model, and finally the old tea lady fired for telling the truth. Kwan listened without interrupting. When Leo finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Your grandmother," Kwan said at last, "sent you there to find out whether the bank she built still had a spine. It seems it does not. So let me ask you the only question that matters. Do you want to be angry, or do you want to win so completely and lawfully that none of it can ever be undone?" "I want to win," Leo said.
cleanly, where everyone can see it. Then we do not make a scene, Quan said, and Leo could hear the old lawyer smiling for the first time. We build the file until it is too heavy for anyone to lift off these people. We move quietly, and when the moment comes, we let them make the scene. For us.
What followed over the next 11 days was a masterclass in patience. Leo did not storm the CEO's office or announce who he was. He did what his grandmother had taught him. He gathered the truth until it was undeniable and let the truth do the shouting. First, the drive logs. Quan quietly retained a forensic technology firm. The bank's own systems were, after all, ultimately governed by the family trust, and they pulled the raw access records the crude scrub had never truly erased. There it was, in cold timestamps. Mabel's model, created and refined across 5 weeks. Bryce's copy, created in under 2 minutes at 2:11 a.m., 4 days before the deadline, from Bryce's own login on Bryce's own laptop, on the 40th floor Wi-Fi. The theft was written in the machine's memory in a language no lawyer could argue with. Second, the witness and the watch. Quan's team took a calm, recorded statement from Meijie, then pulled the 40th floor lift lobby and corridor CCTV the CEO's office had conveniently never reviewed. There was Bryce, entering the lounge at 2:04 a.m. with his laptop bag. There was Meijie, arriving at 2:25 to clear the containers, exactly as she'd said. And the stolen watch appeared nowhere in the timeline, because Bryce had reported it missing a full 2 days after he claimed it had vanished, a lie the timestamps caught by the throat. The client it supposedly belonged to, quietly asked, had never left any watch at all. Third, the part that made even Albert Quan pause, the partnership. Because once you have the authority to look, you find everything. Victor Tang's capital injection turned out to be a slow, quiet accumulation of Aurora Pacific shares through 3 nominee companies, paired with a proposed agreement that carried a side letter. Bryce had not earned his summer offer any more than he'd earned the award. His father had been buying it, and the bank around it, all along. And now there was a paper trail. But building a case in daylight is one thing. Keeping a 6-week secret from a man with unlimited money is another. And here, for the first time, the story turned genuinely dangerous. Victor Tang had not built an empire by losing gracefully. The moment his people heard that a tea lady's word and a scholarship analyst's complaint were being taken seriously, and that some unfamiliar law firm was suddenly asking for CCTV, they went hunting. Tang hired an investigator to dig into everyone causing trouble for his son, which meant inevitably digging into Leo New. For 3 days, Leo felt the walls tighten. A man in a parked car photographed him at the ferry pier. Someone rang his Sham Shui Po landlord asking about the quiet tenant upstairs. The bank's HR received a request on convincing letterhead for Leo New's full application file and home records. If the investigator pulled that thread hard enough before the committee day, the whole disguise could come apart. And worse, Tang's people would flip the story. A spoiled heir who'd played a cruel prank on honest juniors, the villain of his own expose. Leo called Quan at midnight. They're digging. Then we let them find exactly what we want them to find, Quan said. Quietly and lawfully, the trust's own people made sure every request ran into sealed privacy protections and dead-end scholarship trusts. All true, all impenetrable. The investigator turned up a broke graduate from Sham Shui Po with airtight, boring records and reported back that Leo Ning was precisely what he appeared to be. Reassured his son's tormentor was a nobody, Victor Tang called off the hunt. It was the last easy night he would have. Bryce, meanwhile, made the mistake that put the sharpest edge on the blade. Uneasy that the theft story wouldn't lie down, he decided to nail shut a witness, Anjali Rao, a first-year analyst who had been at the printers late that night and had, in fact, seen Bryce carrying 2 laptops into the lounge. He cornered her by the pantry and offered her money,
Real money, enough to clear a year of the loans she was quietly carrying, to sign a statement that she'd seen Mabel and the scholarship intern leaking the model instead. "You're clever," he told her. "Clever people back the winning side early." For one long moment, Anjali thought about her loans, her family, everything she was afraid to lose. Then she thought about the intern who'd quietly halved a colleague's ticket pile at midnight and asked for nothing. "No," she said. Her voice shook, but she said it. "You want the difference between you and them? They helped me when I was no use to anyone. You only want me now that I am. I'm not for sale." And then, because courage grows the instant it is used, she went straight to Desmond Yao and repeated every word. He wrote it down, dated it, and signed as witness.
That was Bryce's fatal error. He had stolen a model and framed a tea lady. Now he had tried to buy false witness in front of someone brave enough to report it and a managing director willing to record it. The file had grown its cruelest edge, and Bryce had handed it over himself. The emotional low came on the 11th day. Meiji's husband was readmitted to hospital, and Meiji, jobless, her name in the mud, her savings draining on the private sessions she now had to pay for out of pocket, sat in the ward and for the first time stopped believing it would ever be all right. She called Leo. "I know you said wait, a boy," she said, her voice hollow. "But I don't think waiting fixes this one. Some things money just wins. Maybe it's time I taught you that." Leo stood at his window, looking north toward the glow of the tower across the harbor, and made himself say the hardest sentence in the whole plan. "One more week, Meiji. Give me one more week, and then I promise you will never have to wait on anyone's mercy in that building again." On the surface, nothing changed, which is what made the noose so tight. Bryce, riding high, had won the Analyst of the Summer with Mabel's stolen model, and the award was to be presented on Friday in the 42nd floor sky lobby, in front of the CEO, the committee, the whole cohort, and, as guests of honor, Victor Tang and his lawyers, there to also sign the partnership and unveil the plaque for the new Tang trading floor. Bryce spent the week doing victory laps. He cornered Leo by the lifts on Wednesday. "Heard your girlfriend's got a theft problem?" he said, grinning. "Shame. She'll lose the offer, maybe worse. And the trolley lady? Go on. You should have just fetched the coffee, mate. All of this is because you forgot your place. This is my bank. My family's name is about to be on the floor you stand on. And you'll be back on the ferry by Monday." Leo looked at him for a long moment. Everything in him wanted to end it right there. Instead, he let the noose tighten one more inch. "You keep saying it's your family's bank," Leo said quietly. "Say that on Friday, at the ceremony, into the microphone." "I'll say it to the whole room, loser," Bryce sneered. "Be there. Watch me take my award." He walked off laughing. He has no idea, Leo thought, that I just asked him to dig his own grave, and he said yes. That evening, an unexpected ally stepped up. Desmond Yao, who had been quietly sick with guilt all week, found Leo alone by the printers and set a small drive on the desk. "Every draft Miss Chow ever showed me, with my dated comments going back 5 weeks, he said, "and my written statement that the model is hers, and that the boy accused of leaking it is the one who fixed the whole desk's hedge error in 10 seconds. I let a man in an expensive suit make me hold my tongue for a fortnight, and I've despised myself for it." He squared his shoulders. "Whatever you're planning for Friday, and I don't think you're quite a scholarship intern, I'll stand up and say all of it, on the record." Leo shook his hand and did not correct him. There was one last piece. On Thursday night, Albert Kwan called back. "It's done," he said. "The trustees convened this afternoon. On the evidence, the wrongful dismissal, the theft and framing, the attempt to buy false witness, the nominee share buying and the side letter, and per your grandmother's will,
control of the founding trust and the chairmanship of the bank that trust holds passes to you on the date she named. Applause. Which is tomorrow, clock. Friday. I'll be there at 11. The board will be waiting on the line to formally seat the new chairman. Applause. Your grandmother will be very proud. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you go to work as who you really are.
Leo hung up and stood at his window, looking across the black water at the tower with his family's name on it in gold, glowing against the dark. In the morning, the ferry would carry him across one more time, and this time, everyone would learn who the intern on the Star Ferry really was. Friday morning, the 42nd floor sky lobby of Aurora Pacific gleamed. Beneath the words etched in steel, "Trust is the only currency we cannot print," 100 chairs had been set in tidy rows, the whole of Victoria Harbor blazing behind the glass. A low stage held a lectern, a microphone, and on a black plinth, the Crystal Analyst of the Summer Award. At the front sat the important people, the interim CEO, Gordon Pack, sweating lightly in a beautiful suit, the investment committee, a row of senior bankers, and in the seats of honor, the tycoon Victor Tang, flanked by 2 lawyers in matching charcoal, checking their watches. Behind a velvet rope, a covered plaque waited, the Tang trading floor. And in the third row, in a cheap gray suit, sat Leo Ning. Beside him, because Leo had insisted, and because Albert Kwan had made 2 phone calls that made it so, sat Meiji, uncomfortable in her good blouse, clutching her handbag, not understanding why the polite young lawyer had asked her to come. On her other side sat Mabel Chow, pale and confused, and Anjali Rao, steady and grim. The ceremony began. Gordon Pack made a speech about excellence. The committee chair made a speech about the future. And then Pack smiled toward the front and said, "It is my great pleasure to present this year's Analyst of the Summer, a young man whose work represents the very best of this institution, Mr. Bryce Tang." Applause. Bryce rose, buttoned his jacket, and strode to the stage like an heir to a throne. He lifted the Crystal Award, turned to the room, and could not resist. He never could.
"Thank you," Bryce said into the microphone. "You know, some people are just built for this. My family built half of what you can see out that window. That new floor? Our name. This bank? My family's about to own the best part of it." He smiled at the applause, and then his eyes found Leo in the third row, and the smile curdled into a smirk. Not everyone belongs on a floor like this. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. And at exactly that moment, the great glass doors at the back of the sky lobby opened. A tall, unhurried old man in an impeccable suit walked in, flanked by 2 people carrying document cases. Albert Kwan did not rush. He walked straight down the center aisle, and something about the absolute certainty of his stride made the whole room go quiet. He stopped at the front, turned to the CEO, and said in a voice that carried to every corner, "Mr. Pack, forgive the interruption. My name is Albert Kwan. I am counsel to the Cheng Family Trust and executor of the late Madam Cheng Wan-Yi's estate." He set a phone on the lectern and pressed it. "The full board of the trust is on the line. They have an announcement that cannot wait." A voice came from the phone, clear in the silent room. "This is Deputy Chair Teresa Ho. As of 11 o'clock this morning, per the trust deed and the will of Cheng Wan-Yi, majority control of Aurora Pacific, the founding shares and the chairmanship of this bank, passes to her sole heir and grandson." Victor Tang's lawyers stopped checking their watches. "Would the new chairman please come forward," the voice said, "so the board may formally seat him." And in the third row, the intern in the cheap gray suit stood up. Every head turned. Bryce, still on the stage, still holding the crystal, laughed once, a thin, confused sound. "What is this? Some joke? He takes the ferry?" Leo walked down the aisle. He did not hurry. He passed Victor Tang, whose face was already changing, and stopped for one moment beside Meiji to put a hand on her shoulder,
so the whole floor watched the accused thief's accuser stand with the woman he'd had thrown out. Then he climbed the 3 steps to the stage, walked to the lectern, and leaned toward the phone. "I'm here," he said. "Leo Cheng Ka Lok." And the whole room turned the color of ash. Gordon Pak's face drained white as he understood who he let be bullied all summer. The committee chair gripped a chair. Victor Tang's lawyers were whispering fast, and Bryce Tang stood frozen at the center of the stage, the crystal shaking in his white-knuckled hands as the pieces slammed together. The Ferry, the cheap suit, Bennett, Coffee Boy, one call from my father and you're begging, every cruel word said to the person who owned it all. Leo turned to face him. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Put her name back on it," Leo said. 6 words. The same 6 words the whole story had opened on. Bryce's mouth opened and closed. You can't just... "I can, actually." Leo nodded to Albert Kwan, who opened the first case and gestured to a technician. The vast screen behind the stage, meant for Bryce's victory slides, flickered to life. There would be no need to take anyone's word for anything. The room was about to see it.
"Let's do this in the order you earned it, Bryce," Leo said, calm as a surgeon. "You told this room the bank basically belongs to your family. You said it into that microphone 30 seconds ago." The screen split in 2. On the left, Mabel's model, its version history scrolling back 5 weeks, edit after edit, night after night. On the right, Blanquette, 4 days before the deadline. 2 sets of tabs sat side by side, identical beneath the cosmetic renaming. No flashing graphics, no captions, just 2 timelines, cold and plain, telling the whole story to 100 people at once. Somehow the quiet of it was worse than any accusation. "This is the forensic drive log," Leo said. "It shows Miss Chow's restructuring model, built over 5 weeks, and it shows a copy made from your laptop at your login at 11 minutes past 2 in the morning, the model you just accepted an award for. You didn't build a cell of it. You took it from the girl at the desk under the broken vent." He paused, and for the first time something almost like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. But here's the part you could never have planned for. You renamed the tabs. You reworded the labels. You scrubbed the metadata. You were thorough. He nodded to the screen, where a single hidden cell now glowed, selected. You just didn't know she signs her work. Months of habit, taught by a father who drives a minibus. Sign it where only you can find it, so no one can ever tell you it wasn't yours. It's still in your copy, right now, exactly where she left it, because you were too busy stealing it to read it well enough to find it. It reads, "Built by the girl from Sham Shui Po." He let it land. You couldn't even understand what you stole well enough to erase that it was hers. A gasp moved through the crowd. Desmond Yao stood up. "I can confirm every word," he said, his voice ringing off the glass. 5 weeks of dated drafts. The model is Miss Chow's. I'll swear to it anywhere. "Next," Leo said, "you told Mr. Pak that this woman," he gestured to Mei Jie, who had risen, stunned, "stole a client's watch." The screen changed to silent, time-stamped CCTV, 25 with her trolley. "Here's the footage. Here's the fact that you reported the watch missing 2 days after you said it vanished. There was no watch. There was no theft." Then a second clip played, the one everyone had heard about and never seen. Bryce's own phone video of Mei Jie on her knees mopping while the boys laughed off camera. Played here in this silent marble room in front of her colleagues, it did not look funny at all. It looked like exactly what it was. The crowd was murmuring now, an ugly turning sound, turning against Bryce. "There's more," Leo said, still not raising his voice. 2 days ago,
You offered a first year named Anjali Rao enough money to clear her loans if she'd sign a false statement. Anjali rose, pale but steady, and nodded once. She said no. Then she reported it, and Mr. Yao witnessed and dated her account. Leo laid the signed page on the lectern. Do you understand what that is, Bryce? That's not a bad review. Attempting to procure false testimony is a crime. You didn't just cheat. You tried to buy a struggling junior's honesty, and it turned out she had more of it than your entire family could afford. Then he turned to the two shadows in the second row. And you two. You held the camera. You saved the room. You laughed on cue because standing next to him felt like standing near the throne. Your logins are on that drive that week too. The conduct review will see every line on Monday. One of them, Toby, the younger, was quietly crying. There might be something to be made of that one yet. Leo filed it, without cruelty, in the part of the ledger he kept for people who could still turn back.
Leo looked last toward the front row at Gordon Pack, whose face had gone the color of old paper. And the adults in this room who felt a partnership lean on their shoulder and chose it over the truth? That is a longer conversation. The murmuring had stopped. Now the Sky lobby was perfectly silent, because everyone finally understood this was not a tantrum. It was a reckoning, delivered by someone who held every fact, every timestamp, and every ounce of the authority to make it stick. And finally, Leo said, and for the first time he looked past Bryce, straight at Victor Tang. The partnership. Shares bought quietly through 3 nominee companies all spring. A side letter promising your family a board seat, a floor with your name on it, and a guaranteed job for a nominated family member. You weren't rescuing this bank, Mr. Tang. You were buying it out from under an old woman's grave and dressing it up as generosity. He set the last page down. That's not a partnership. The regulators have a different word for undisclosed nominee accumulation and a purchased seat. They'll be reading these papers next week. Victor Tang stood, gray-faced, one hand raised. Now, let us be reasonable, young man. I'm sure we can reach an arrangement. Everything has a price. That, Leo said quietly, is exactly what my grandmother sent me here to find out. Whether her bank still had anything money couldn't buy. He looked up at the words etched across the wall. Trust is the only currency we cannot print. She put those there the year I was born. I'm going to make them true again. The whole room had heard it. A tycoon, in front of 100 witnesses and a board still live on the phone, trying to buy the new chairman a minute after learning who he was. A few people actually gasped at the nakedness of it. Leo didn't argue and didn't shout. He simply let the offer hang in the air until its own ugliness had filled every corner of the lobby. He turned back to Bryce and delivered the payoff, beat by beat. So here's how today ends. The award is revoked. It goes to the person who actually built the work, and that's Ms. He gently took the crystal out of Bryce's frozen hands and set it back on its plinth. Your graduate offer is void. Your conduct here, the theft, the framing of an employee, the attempt to buy false testimony, goes to the conduct review, and where it's criminal, to the authorities this afternoon. Bryce Tang, who had never in his life heard the word no, finally heard it, and something behind his face came apart. "You can't do this to me," he whispered. "Do you know who my family is?" Leo looked at him, almost gently. "I do. I've known exactly who you are all summer." He paused. The question was always whether you knew who you were talking to. And you never did, because you never once looked at anyone you were cruel to. The colleague at the bad desk, the junior with the loans, the barista, the tea lady. You only ever measured what they could do for you. That's why you lost. Not because your name wasn't grand enough, because you weren't kind enough.
You had every advantage a person can be handed, and the one test that mattered, you failed on day one, in a loading bay, over an empty coffee cup. Security, moving on Albert Kwan's quiet signal, began to walk toward the stage. Not for Meiji this time.
Bryce looked for his shadows and found them staring at the floor. He looked for his father and found Victor Tang already half turned away, murmuring to a lawyer, calculating his own survival, because that had always been the only language the family truly spoke. And in that moment, Bryce understood the thing that would follow him far longer than any dismissal, that he had spent his whole life surrounded by people, and not one of them was standing with him, because he had never once stood with anyone else. His family's name was going on the floor. The room was full of the people he'd wronged, and the coffee boy owned them both. For what it's worth, Leo said, quieter now, this didn't have to be your story. If you'd just said thank you in that loading bay, if you'd left Meiji alone, or given Mabel the credit that was hers, or been decent to one single person who could do nothing for you, you'd be walking out of here today with an award and a future. You had every advantage a person can be given. The only one you refused to use was the one that's free. But Leo wasn't finished, because a true ending is not only about who falls, it's about who rises. He stepped off the stage and crossed to Meiji, who was crying and trying not to, crushing her handbag in her hands. "Meiji," he said, and his voice finally cracked just a little. "I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry. I made a promise to a stubborn old woman that I'd keep my name to myself until I understood her bank. You want to know what taught me the most here? Not one meeting." He turned to face the room. "Madame May is reinstated this morning with full back pay, her husband's benefits restored and backdated to the day she lost them, and a written apology from this bank. And as my first act as chairman, I'm endowing the Cheng Wan Yi Award, given every year to the member of this bank, banker, analyst, or support staff, who best shows character to someone who can do nothing for them in return." Meiji pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. Then Leo found Mabel in the crowd. "The award for the best work this summer was never a question," he said. "It's yours. It always was. Your name is literally inside it." He restored her authorship on the record, confirmed her graduate offer on the flagship desk, and named her the true analyst of the summer. Mabel put both hands over her face. A few feet away, Anjali and Bia, quietly reinstated by a single phone call an hour earlier, were laughing and crying at once. The sky lobby erupted, analysts on their feet, some crying, Desmond Yao grinning like a man who'd found his spine and was glad to have it back. At the edges, quietly, Victor Tang and his lawyers were walked out one door and Bryce another, no longer an heir, just a young man who'd never been told no and had now been told it by a whole room at once. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was the coffee boy, standing under the words, "Trust is the only currency we cannot print," lifted up by a room full of the people he'd looked straight through. That afternoon, Leo Cheng took the Star Ferry home one last time as a stranger. Lower deck, port side, reading his paper. An old woman across the aisle struggled with her market bags. He got up and helped her without being asked. He didn't do it because anyone was watching. He did it because that, in the end, was the whole point. In the weeks that followed, though the clip would only ever capture that one bright morning, it all rolled out as Leo had promised. The stolen award was formally revoked and reissued to Mabel. Bryce's offer was rescinded the same week his father's nominee share buying became the opening exhibit in a regulatory inquiry, and the Tang partnership collapsed with it. Gordon Pack resigned before he could be removed. Meiji's husband kept his dialysis chair without a single missed session. And the new floor quietly lost its intended name. The plaque that was never unveiled went into storage. And the trading floor was renamed for a Shangguan money changer's daughter, who had been turned away from 3 banks and built her own. The reason in the end that any of it existed at all.
Bryce Tang had a name on a building and a father who owned half a street. May J had a tea trolley, a tin of salted plum sweets, and 30 years of treating strangers like they mattered. Only one of them still had their dignity when the harbor lights came on that night.
So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Was Leo right to stay hidden the whole summer? To let it get as far as an old woman fired and a sick man's treatment on a countdown? Or should he have revealed who he was the very first morning in that loading bay over an empty coffee cup? Tell me below, and be honest, because we've all, at least once, measured someone by their job or their name. If you believe how you treat people should count for more than the surname you were born with, subscribe and stay for the next one. The son of a Gulf property empire who ordered a quiet shop clerk and an elderly tourist thrown out of his family's gleaming mall, until the clerk did the one thing that money in that whole marble palace couldn't buy or fake. You won't believe how that one ends.